Hello, everybody. A warm welcome from Chennai to the Chennai Storytelling Festival. The 14th edition is on for the past month now and into March. We have 14 2-hour segments of storytelling for adults, and this is the penultimate one. On a Friday evening, welcoming everybody to this wonderful story session where I, Pratigya Haran, will be hosting and trying to flow the whole entire session. Uh, let's begin right away with our very first teller for today. We have Stefania. Stefania is joining us from Italy. Let me just spotlight you, Stefania. And she brings a story from her own land. Stefania, please tell a little bit about yourself, your work, and share your story with us.
Okay, so I don't want to say much about myself except that I'm a storyteller based in Italy, and what I love most are folk tales from all over the world. This is actually the first time I take part in this festival, and in the past editions, I always told stories from other countries, but for this year, I would like to share with you a story that comes from my region of origin. I've no longer lived there for a long time, and it's called the Friuli. It's the most northeastern region of Italy. It's a very small region. It has a shape of a square, actually, and it is really crossed in the middle throughout its length by a river. The river is called Tagliamento, and it's the place where I spent my holidays, my summers when I was a child. So it's a place that it is very much connected with me, but it's also very much connected with the story that I would like to share with you, because it's a story that is started in a village lying by the Tagliamento River a long time ago. It was a cold and dark winter day, but at that time, not only the sky was dark, but also the villagers' hearts, because a terrible war had just ended, which had brought poverty and hunger, but above all, death in almost every household. And so each family in the village had somehow shut themselves up in their pain and desperation. And so the people in the village had stopped speaking with each other. They no longer communicated with each other. They just ignored themselves. And so the streets of the village, which were once filled with the cheerful voices of children and the voices of the women that were singing while doing their housework, were now deadly silent. Now, in that village lived also a washerwoman who had a very special gift, because she could hear the voice of the Tagliamento River. Yes, because there's one thing that I haven't told you about this river, and it's the fact that it's a resurgence river, which means that sometimes its water along its bed suddenly disappear, and then they reappear somewhere else. But the places where they disappear and they reappear are not always the same. And so at that time, you can imagine it was a long time ago. There were no geographical studies on any river. And so for the people of the village, it was often difficult to find the water of the river. It was difficult for everyone, except for the washerwoman, because she had the voice of the river to guide her. And that's why the washerwoman was the only one who could do that job. And especially in winter, because in winter the water in the fountains and wells froze, it was very cold. And so nobody could afford to waste the wood just to heat and defrost the ice to get water to wash their dirty clothes. So the washerwoman had a lot of work to do, but it was a poor job, and she was able to earn just enough to feed her children. The children of their husband had died in that terrible war. Now, on that day, the washerwoman had woken up very early in the morning, as usual. And she had walked down to the river carrying on her head a basket full of dirty clothes. And she spent the day washing and washing and washing and washing with her hands constantly immersed in icy cold water, so that now her hands hurt, and she no longer felt her fingertips. And sometimes she feared. She feared that while washing, her hands could freeze too, and they could detach from her body and be carried away by the current. And if she looked at her hands, she was ashamed because she was still young, but she had the hands of an old lady, calloused, rough hands with hard skin. Now it was already late, and the sun set, and it was a little dark outside because of that time there were no street lamp. The only light was the light of the moon. And the washerwoman was walking home with her basket of clothes on her head, and she was very tired. And so she walked slowly, and she, with her eyes staring at the road ahead, a dirty road that was bordered only by big river stones. And when she suddenly, while she was walking, she saw something green glittering on the road ahead. And when she got closer, she could see that it was a green salamander. It seemed very heavy because she was trying to get away from the road and to move away just to cross those big river stones, but it seemed that she was too heavy to be able to do it. And so the washerwoman stopped. She put down a basket of clothes. She knelt down, and when she lifted with her hands the green salamander, she understood why she was so heavy. Yes, because it was a she, and the green salamander was pregnant. Oh, little salamander, I know that giving birth may be hard and painful, but don't worry. Everything will go well, and your children will be the greatest joy of your life. And the washerwoman put the green salamander down on soft grass far away from the road. Don't worry. You are safe now here. Nothing can hurt you. Good luck, my friend. But as soon as the washerwoman stood up to walk away, she felt a warm gust of wind, and before her eyes, the green salamander turned into a beautiful girl. Her eyes were as blue as the river water. Her hair were as golden as wheat, and she was wearing a long green dress. Now the washerwoman knew who she was. She was an Agana, a river fairy. She had heard a lot of stories about Aganas, but she had never actually seen one. And then she heard the Aganas speaking. Your hands may be hard, but not your soul. Thank you, because you have saved me and my child. Now, please, please, let me help you too. Please take this bowl of wool so that you can make warm clothes for yourself and for your children, so that your children will be no longer cold. So the washerwoman took the bowl of wool, but when she looked at it, well, she instinctively thought, but what can I do? What can I do with such a small, teeny, tiny bowl of wool? But then she regretted for the thought, and she just wanted to say, thank. But the Aganas had already disappeared. And so she took the bowl of wool, she put it in her pocket, and then she took again a basket of clothes and walked home. And that night, when her children were asleep, she took the bowl of wool and she started to knit. What can I do with such a teeny tiny bowl of wool? It won't be enough if I for half a glass of my youngest child. But then, to her great astonishment, she found out that the more she knitted, the longer the bowl of wool became. And so she indeed was able to make warm clothes for herself and for her children. But then she thought that that gift would be greater. It would be more precious if it was shared. And so she knocked at the door of her neighbors, with whom she had no longer talked for ages, and she offered them the magic bowl of wool. And so her neighbors took the bowl of wool and they made warm clothes for themselves. But then they knocked at the neighbors too and offered them the magic bowl of wool. And their neighbors did the same with their neighbors, and their neighbors with their neighbors. And so one after the other, the people in the village started to communicate again. They started to help each other again. They started to be again a community connected by an invisible thread of wool. And it is said that still today in that village, that magic ball of wool is passed down from generation to generation, so that that invisible thread will never be broken again.
Thank you for that very warm story, Stefania. You put a smile on all our faces.
So I have to say that I chose this story because, well, I have a very difficult relationship actually with my place of origin for a very long time, and I somehow reestablish a connection with that place through stories. And so what I would like to perhaps to ask to all the other people in this virtual room, what is it that you think that connects you with your community or with the people around you? Or it could be the place where you were born, or perhaps with the place you are now. We have sometimes invisible threads that keep us together, and perhaps we are not even aware of them until we just stop and think.
Okay, maybe I'll go ahead. Um, I live in Chennai, which is down south in India. I was born and brought up here, but my native is in Rajasthan, which is further up north. So I've always felt connected to the place that I live in. A few years ago, I happened to go to my birthplace, not birthplace, my native place with my parents. And often heard people tell me, there's nothing like going back to your land. And I've never understood that. But when I went there, for me, what really struck me was down the streets when I'm walking down the village, every single household is talking a language which I speak. So here we speak in Tamil, that is the regional language, which I speak pretty well. But Rajasthani is what we speak at home. And I have never felt that before, but as I just walk down the streets and every single house, I can hear the conversations inside the house, and I could connect with each one of them instantly. And I realized, I think now I know what it means to going back to your roots or going back to where you belong. So I think that is the connect for me, the regional language, the very dialect which I speak at home. It really felt home. I genuinely felt home at that time. Thanks for that, Stefania.
Or actually, also the title of this story, which is Agana, actually the name of the river Fairy is connected with the local dialect, because in our local dialect, water is translated Age. So like Agana comes from Age, which has to do with the water. So the language is also a very, very strong element of connection. I do agree.
Thanks for that.
I'd like to say something about language. I am Croatian born, but came to Canada when I was 3 years old. So the language eventually, when my parents died away with me. And then my sister and I, we phone each other. She lives in Florida. I've started to speak my language again to her. and she has dementia, so it makes her happy because she can remember that language because she was 16 when she came to Canada. So the language now has drawn us together a little bit and made us feel like we're back in a family, or so language is so important. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Carol, you want to go ahead? And maybe David after that?
Yes. 39 years ago, I went to a meditation retreat at the Christine Center, and I felt like I was home. It was metta, loving kindness. And I met a man there, and 38 years ago, we were married at the center. And this last April, we moved to the Wisconsin woods. We're half a mile from the center. So I can walk there every day and meet the people that come, and I volunteer there. And it's so beautiful in the woods with the night sky. It's so quiet, and it feels like I'm in a womb, just birthing. My creativity's just exploding. And I feel very blessed that I could do this. I lived 50 years in a suburb of Minneapolis, and I didn't realize how noisy it was and all the smells in the air until I got out in the country.
Thank you.
Stefania, I just wanted to appreciate the way you told that story. I was completely entranced. I love the way you used gaze and your hands. And it's an interesting question you asked at the end, because it wasn't what I was thinking about. But as you talk about it now, I've got a strange relationship as well. I don't necessarily feel that connected. I live very near where I grew up. My parents are from another part of the UK, from South Wales, but even they weren't very connected to where they came from because of the history. There's a lot of migration between different regions of the UK. But nevertheless, what I was thinking is I do love where I live, but I don't feel that kind of close connection to neighbourhood, although we have some good neighbours. But I also think it's also very dependent. I mean, and also I'm very connected to different cultures. I always feel very at home wherever I go. But I think that it's when it's taken away from you. And I'm working very closely with a lot of people these days who, without any choice in the matter, are having their homes and their cultures an attempt to have that removed and stripped away. And how when people try to remove your heritage from you, how central and important and vital it becomes. So I'm telling stories with a lot of people who are in great pain at the moment, and I'm particularly thinking about Palestine. So that story is it's a very healing story, and a lot of the stories that I'm working with at the moment are stories that are about kind of connection and healing. And I love that image of the wool that binds the people together and rebuilds community after a time of loss, devastation, war, and people being isolated from each other. I think we need these healing stories, and it's not just now in Palestine that we're all feeling very vulnerable. I think we're all feeling incredibly vulnerable. Well, maybe I'm making an assumption, but I think all of us are feeling very close to the edge at the moment, and the possibility of an apocalypse, which some people seem to be chasing, which is an extraordinary moment. I don't think I've ever experienced a moment like this, that there seem to be people in power who actually are looking for apocalypse. So I think stories that connect us are just so vitally important. I've talked enough. Thank you so much for the story.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. So true. Stories that do reflect or force us to reflect upon what is happening around us, and the healing part of the story is definitely something that we look forward to. Thank you so much, Stefania, for that. We will now move on to our next teller. We have Bertha Fernandes. joining us from Illinois. She's sharing a self-authored story called it The Gilded Cage. Welcome, Bertha, to Chennai Storytelling Festival. Talk a little bit about yourself and please share your story.
Hi, everyone. A good whatever part of the day it is for you. As she said, I'm Bertha Fernandes. Having been in the teaching profession, I did tell stories, actually anecdotes, to illustrate a point that that was part of my lecture, talk, speech, whatever I was making. But I was never part of a storytelling forum. And I must say, I'm glad I belong to this warm and vibrant group, I would say community of storytellers, thanks to Eric and his team of efficient organizers. As she said, yeah, this is self-authored. I dabble a little in writing, prose, and poetry. Okay, that's all I'll say about myself. And let me delve straight into my story. The Gilded Cage. Madhu lay awake in her bed. She was unable to sleep. Thoughts and questions raced through her mind. Does being a good wife mean obliterating oneself at the altar of marriage? Suraj, her husband, knew that for her, dance was not just a casual pastime. It was her passion, her way of connecting with the world, the very essence of her being. She had dreams of becoming a renowned Bharatanatyam dancer. And now Suraj was quashing those dreams. It was barely 6 months since Madhu and Suraj got married, the result of a whirlwind romance. Suraj, who knew very little about Indian classical dance, had nevertheless attended a performance at the invitation of a friend whose cousin was performing on stage. And there he saw Madhu. As he told her later, when I saw you on stage in your red and gold sari, ornately adorned, my interest was piqued. And then I saw you dance. Your head, your hands, your feet, your whole body move with such perfect, graceful, rhythmic harmony, your face expressing a range of emotions. I knew I was seeing art, a thing of beauty. I love things of beauty. You, my dear, captured my heart. Madhu was ecstatic. Suraj Malhotra, this very attractive man, heir to Malhotra Industries, had recognized the artist in her and then chosen her to be his bride. Had she, in the euphoria of that short, exciting courtship, overlooked any telltale signs? The first time she noticed anything was when they were on their honeymoon in Spain. They were standing in front of the nativity facade of the Sagrada Familia church, and a young Italian who had just returned from India had told her how much he loved the Punjab region. And she was enthusiastically responding that, yes, she was from that region, when she felt Suraj grip her arm so tight that she later noticed a mark there. Let's go and see the other facade, he said, and dragged her away. So silly of him to be jealous, she thought, but then made it a point not to interact with any strange males, and the rest of the journey of the honeymoon went off smoothly. After their return to Jalandhar, Suraj got busy with running the family business, and Madhu with getting into the groove of things in the Malhotra household. It was a huge place, and exploring the rooms and the estate was in itself an adventure. She often visited the spacious living room where she stood in awe of the vast collection of exquisite art. She loved to visit Suri, the stunning yellow vermilion-throated canary in her gorgeous golden cage, always supplied with the best and most exotic of juicy fruits. But most of all, she immersed herself in her dancing, in her Bharatanatyam. Suraj had recently arranged for Guru Acharya to conduct the lessons at the residence. Of course, she missed going to the dance academy, which lay just beyond the walls of the Malhotra estate. She used to run across the garden in her gungroos, and she used to love it when her friends told her how they waited to hear the sweet sound of her jingling gungroos mingle with her tinkling laughter. Anyway, she convinced herself that this arrangement, with the individual attention it afforded her, was best for her progress. One day, when Suraj came back from work, she, bubbling with excitement, told him that Guru Acharya had informed her of a mega event that was coming to a town nearby and that she was ready to perform. He said, Madhu, this is the perfect platform for you to get national recognition. The look she saw on Suraj's face dismayed her. She saw a glint of anger flash through his eyes, his brows furrowed, his lips pursed in a thin line. With a forced smile, he said, Madhu, my dear, you are a Malhotra now. You don't perform for the public. Then what's the use practicing if I will never perform? Of course you will perform, my dear. You will perform for the family. You'll perform for me, your devoted husband. You know how much I love to see you dance, my precious possession, she thought, just like your art objects in your living room. She turned away to tidy an already very tidy table. She had thought that her Suraj, like the sun with its life-giving light and heat, would nurture her talent and nourish her growth. But instead, this Suraj was scorching her soul. In what way was she different from Suri? In her gilded cage, whom she had caught often looking out wistfully at the vast expansive sky outside, singing sad songs. She had to get away from these restrictions and probably liberate Suri too. She had to come up with a plan. And come up with a plan she did. Suraj was scheduled to leave on a long business meeting. 2 days after his departure, she called up her sister in Pathankot and she explained the situation to her. She said, she said, Naina, I am dying a slow death here. You and Alok have got to help me. The two sisters discussed for a long time. Then the next day she went to her mother-in-law and she said, Manji, I spoke with Naina. She's feeling a little low and she would like my company. Oh, go, Beti. Suraj is not going to be here for many days. Go and be with your sister. It will be good for both of you. I can arrange for Mohan, our driver, to drop you. Pathankot is only 2 hours away. If you leave at 12, he can drop you and be back before it's dark. There's not much traffic at that time. Oh, thank you, Manji. And Manji, may I take Suri with me? I have seen how fond you are of that bird, our little birdie. Okay? But make sure you take good care of her. She is used to the very best. Sure, Manji. And before you knew it, Madhu and Suri were on the way to Pathankot. On the last leg of the journey, which was hilly, after they crossed a bend, they saw 3 tall men standing with something like a huge plank blocking their path. One of them advanced towards the car, and when, as Mohan related later, he lowered the window, he was attacked and knocked unconscious. When he regained consciousness, Madhu Mem Sahib, the bird in its cage, the baggage all gone, ghayab. He called out to no avail. No, he would not be able to identify the 3 men because they all wore headgear, dark glasses, sported mustaches and long beards. Police investigations led nowhere. The 2 families were distressed. Suraj was livid with anger that his prized possession had been taken from him. But he gradually accepted the fact that Madhu had met with a tragic end. The Malhotras moved on with their lives and even started looking for a new bride for Suraj. Madhu's parents were devastated. Following the advice of their daughter Naina, they cut off all ties with Jalandhar and relocated to South India. But the events of that day were spoken of for days on end. More than 2 years later, a family friend returning from Mumbai told them about a young Bharatnatyam dancer named Vani, who was quite the rage there. She looks like the living reincarnation of Madhu, he said. But most people believed that Madhu had been abducted, maybe molested, maybe even killed. In fact, till today, the rumor persists that there are times when around the Malhotra estate, one can hear the sweet sound of jingling gungroos mingled with tinkling laughter. But I hope you and I know better. Thank you.
Lovely, Bertha. Enjoyed that story. I didn't see that coming, I must say. I love the twist in the end where I assume she lives on as Vani. I really like that.
Yeah. Okay, you know what? I saw that there's so much of this crazy desire for power and dominating, taking over people, country, places in the macro world around us. Okay. Now, I don't feel equipped to write about that situation. So I chose the smallest unit of the microcosm, a couple, and tried to give some hope there, where there is the sense of people taking over someone else's life. There are ways to get out of it. And I guess I modeled Suraj a little bit along the lines of Robert Browning's My Last Duchess, the Duke there. Okay. Okay. So now I guess I'm supposed to lead the discussion.
Yes, Bertha, that would be great.
Okay, I would ask you if there is anything that you would take away from the story, what would it be? Anything that you feel impacted your life? What would you? Because I know this story is very different. Yes, go
I
ahead.
think this story is so wonderful because March is Women's History Month. And I don't know about other women, but there have been times where I've felt like a former husband kept me in a cage and really did not nourish my growth. You know, it was like I was arm candy. And I think, you know, women, you can be seduced when you're young, but as you get older, you want equality and you don't want to just be valued for what you're doing to make some man happy. You want an identity of your own.
Yeah.
Goldie. Always a way to get away. Women in particular who are in situations like that. But you have to be so brave to find a way out. And sometimes they just don't know how to do that. They feel as if they're chained somehow and they can't leave. Perhaps they have children or something like that. But the bravery that this character in your story had is phenomenal, to go away from her entire family, really, not just the husband, and start her own life, which I admired very much. Thank you.
You see, as she said, it's the month of it's Women's Day on the 10th, I think, right? We're going to be celebrating Women's Day. And so many women just keep making excuses and remain in the same situation. And Madhu did the same thing. When they first started and she noticed him, gripping her arm, drawing her away, all this possessiveness, she made excuses, not letting her go to the dance academy. She convinced herself that it would be good for her. But when she realized that she was not going to perform ever, that means that was the end of her dreams. And that's when she took the step. And most women tend to do that because we want the marriage to work, And so she tried that all along. And finally, and of course, Naina played a big role there because she got her parents to move to South India, where they probably realized that their daughter was still alive, because they cut off all ties with Jalandhar. So a happy ending in the end for at least Madhu and her family. That's what I was working at.
Yeah, excellent.
I know it's a very different story from the lovely, joyful stories we've been hearing through folklore. Yeah. So I was a little hesitant, but I said, okay, let me put it out there anyway.
It's a very important story.
Thank you.
And yes, that is what festivals are for, right? To bring in a variety of stories. So that's really good. I think, Sarah, have you raised your hand? Would you like to share something?
Yes, thank you. I really like that story because I could relate to her. When you're young, you fall in love and, you want to please those men, And then if you have a dream, you do whatever you need to do to fulfill that dream. I liked her bravery because so many of us, we get stuck. We can't move on. We can't leave. I can't leave my family. What will people think, society think about me? So I like the fact that she said, hey, I'm out of here. Let me fulfill my dream. So thank you for sharing that story. That Goldie said everything that I wanted to say. So I was like, oh man, let me take my hand out. Okay. But that was wonderful.
Thank you.
So
Thank you, Sarah. But another thing I wanted to ask you is if you would make any change in the story, either the content or the narration, what would it be?
Sure, Bertha. Before that, I think June had raised her hand. Maybe you want to share something,
Oh, okay,
June?
sorry.
And then we can move on. Yes, please.
Yes, I agree with what the other women said, but I'd also like to say I enjoyed the color you put into the sari, the bells, all the other textures you put into the story, especially when you're not from that culture. It led me in to imagine that girl dancing. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Bertha, what I also liked was that she didn't look for an excuse for herself, but she made sure that he took the bird along. So why should I enjoy the freedom alone? Why not take the bird along and let her or the bird enjoy the freedom as well? So I think that was quite thoughtful of her to do.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Because as a woman, she realized what Suri's position was. And she sang soft, sad songs in spite of the most exotic of juicy fruits. So she kind of paralleled her own situation. The bird, yeah. So any suggestions from you experienced storytellers?
None.
Okay. Thank you. I was looking forward to them, but anyway, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for your comments, all of you.
Thanks, Bertha. I think in that case, we will move on to our next teller. Thank you once again for that very warm story, Bertha. Now we have Carol McCormick, joining us from Wisconsin. Let me just spotlight you, Carol. There we are. Carol, please talk a little bit about yourself, your work, and share your story with us.
Mm-hmm. I apologize. I couldn't, for some reason, change my name here. My husband's last name is Bookmeyer, and my legal name is Carol McCormick Bookmeyer, but my storytelling business is older than my marriage. And so professionally, my business is Carol McCormick Storyteller. I got into storytelling. My first teaching job was in a very poor school district, and I was teaching science and social studies out of books that were 10 years old. And so I really wanted to give my students more experience that was in those textbooks. And I found that storytelling was a way to do it. So that last story really moved me because when I was a young mother, I decided to divorce my husband. He had been unfaithful and he wanted an open marriage and said he would stay with me until our youngest son was 18. But I felt I was being emotionally abused, and my grandmother disowned me. She said, "Women have been putting up with that for centuries. What's your problem? He's such a good provider." But I felt like women today don't need men to make their way in the world. It's hard as a single parent, but I felt, that it was really, I was like that dancer. I felt so confined, and I'm glad I did it, but it was scary. So I've been a professional storyteller for 40 years. At times, especially when I divorced my first husband, I had to get a corporate job and do storytelling on the side because I needed health insurance and I needed a more stable income. One of the things that I'm working on as a storyteller is to try and grow audiences for storytelling, because I think that it should be a legitimate way to make your living and that we need more storytellers. And right now, the festivals that do pay and the conferences, you don't even make your expenses. And we need to change that by getting more audiences for our art form. The story that I'm going to share with you today is written by Sarah Deco, who's a storyteller in London, and it's called Baba Yaga's Mission. I'm sharing it with her permission, and she's allowed me to adapt it and take a 20-minute story and make it into 10 minutes. It's from the book Knock Twice, an anthology of folktales for troubling times, and I encourage you to read the original story. Baba Yaga, the Russian grandmother witch, went into the door of the shopping center. She found a bench to sit on and she listened. She took off her coat with its many pockets. You could see things peeping out of the pockets: spiders, centipedes, beetles. And she heard crying and whining and angry children. She thought, it's such easy pickings these days. Parents are so stressed. They don't pay attention to their children. As she reached into her wheeled shopping bag, she sang a little song. Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the soul of a sad little one. She looked and she saw coming towards her a woman with a pinched face who was wheeling a stroller, and the toddler strapped into that stroller was crying and upset. As she came nearer, Baba Yaga reached into her shopping bag and she took out her water bottle and she unscrewed the top of the bottle. And she looked at the child and she said, "Come to me. I will tell you a story. Once upon a time." An iridescent, shimmering bubble came out of the chest of that little child. It hovered in the air, and Baba Yaga reached out, grabbed it, and put it into her water bottle and screwed back on the lid. The harried mother just went pushing the stroller away and saying, "Shut up, child. Baba Yaga smiled. She had, thanks to cosmetic dentistry, beautiful white teeth instead of her iron crooked teeth. And because of cosmetic surgery, she no longer had warts on her face. Her nose no longer curved down to meet her chin. She was a very pleasant-looking grandmother. She looked and she saw, coming towards her, there was a deluxe double stroller with twin iPads. 2 toddlers were in that stroller, just gazing, staring into screens that were blaring fairy tales. No, it wasn't fairy tales. It was nursery rhymes. Baba Yaga took a piece of candy out of her bag and she waved it. And one of the children looked at her and she said, "Come to me. I will tell you a story. Once upon a time." And again, a shimmering bubble came out of that child's chest and she grabbed it and put it into her water bottle. Baba Yaga scanned the concourse as that woman pushed the toddlers away. If those toddlers had not had an intervention, that particular one of the toddlers, that child would have grown up to be a very materialistic, selfish adult. As Baba Yaga scanned the concourse, she saw up ahead there was a little blond boy. He was sitting on a bench, swinging his legs and staring at the floor. She walked up to him and she said, "Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time," and a shimmering bubble came out of his chest. It hovered in the air and then it went right back in his chest. And the little boy looked right up at her and he said, "What are you doing? I saw you. What did you do to those babies? I want to see what's in your shopping bag." "Oh, no, you don't, little boy. Where is your mother?" "I don't have a mother. My mother died." "Well, who takes care of you?" "My aunt, but she's sick. She drinks too much." "Well, what about your father?" "My father left. He's working back in Russia." "What is your name?" "Vasily." I thought I smelled Russian blood. "Well, I must be going." She turned around and hurried towards the exit of the shopping center, and Vasily followed behind her. Baba Yaga waited at the bus stop, and when her bus came, she hurriedly climbed the stairs and found a seat. Moments later, she felt a tap on her shoulder, and she turned around, and there was Vasily grinning at her. When the bus came to her stop, she grabbed her shopping bag and she got off as fast as she could. Vasily followed her. She came finally to an old-looking abandoned warehouse, and she took out her key and she said, "Vasily, it's time for you to go home." She unlocked the door and went inside, and before it closed, Vasily slipped in. He saw it was a vast, dark space, and there were tall tanks, clear, with amber liquid and shimmering bubbles floating in them. They were open at the top. They went all the way to the ceiling. Vasily went and hid under the bed in the corner. Baba Yaga, she put on the tea kettle. She took off her coat. And then she took the water bottle out of her shopping bag. And she, holding it, she climbed up the iron ladder to one of those tall, tall tanks. And when she was at the top, she unscrewed the lid and poured the bubbles into the amber liquid. Meanwhile, Vasily slipped out from under the bed and he went to her coat. He wanted to search her pockets. He reached in and he felt something slimy and a lizard nipped his finger. Then Baba Yaga noticed him and he called up and yelled at her, "What are those things in the tanks, those bubbles?" "They're souls." "What are souls?" "Ah, has no one taught you anything, Vasily?" "I'm hungry." "There's cabbage soup on the stove. Heat it up." Baba Yaga sat at the table as Vasily was quickly eating the soup, and when he was on his second bowl, she asked him, "Are you here to do a deed, or are you here fleeing from a deed?" Vasily looked dumbfounded. "Oh, never mind." Just then, the wall next to the table began to shake, and there was howling and screaming. A door opened, and a goblin peeped out. Vasily looked past the goblin into the room, and he saw rows and rows of tables, and at each of those tables, there were trolls hunched over computers. The trolls had glowing red eyes. And Baba Yaga yelled, "Be quiet, you trolls!" Immediately, there was silence. But before the troll closed the door, Vasily noticed that the floor around the tables where the trolls were on the computers, it was littered with candy wrappers, potato chip bags, soda cans, beer cans, and each troll had something they were eating in one hand. And then he saw one of the trolls reach down. There was a rat skittering across the floor, and the troll just grabbed the rat, stuffed it in his mouth. Well, the goblin closed the door, and Vasily asked, "Who are they? What are they doing?" "Oh, those are the trolls that brought me across the ocean to America from Russia. They say you have to keep up with the modern times, and they're spreading fear on the internet. They post, lies, fake news, scary things. But now, Vasily, I have something to show you." Baba Yaga went over to her coat, and out of its many pockets, she pulled a mirror. The mirror had snakes and vines around the outside of it. Beautiful, gleaming green. She said, "Vasily, look into this mirror and tell me what you see." Vasily gazed into the mirror. "I see a forest. It's got tall, tall trees. There are birds singing, and I see flowers and mushrooms. There's mice and rabbits and foxes." And then a big brown bear came lumbering towards Vasily, and it roared, and Vasily dropped the mirror. "What is that place?" "That is the wild forest that is my home." "Can I go there? Please, please, would you take me there with you?" Perhaps. Perhaps. Can I come back tomorrow?" "Yes, perhaps you could be my helper. But now, Vasily, you must go home to your aunt." After Vasily left, Baba Yaga went to her rocking chair and she picked up her knitting and she began to knit. "One stitch for the children who feel unseen. One stitch for the stories that make them feel they matter. And one stitch for the forest waiting to return." She smiled as she looked at the tanks humming with their shimmering bubbles and the amber liquid. And she began to tell those bubbles a story. Helpers always arrive when the world needs them most. Our world is torn, but not beyond repair. If we work together in these troubled times, we can live happily ever after. So I'd like to hear what moved you in that story and what you think the message is. It's the first time I've told that story. It's not a story that you can tell to just any audience. Have you heard of Baba Yaga before? Do you know about the Russian
No.
grandmother witch?
I was just wondering, Carol, I've never heard a contemporary Baba Yaga story. So that's definitely a new one for me. I thought Baba Yaga stories are more traditional and the typical Russian ones. So a very interesting take. I've never
Very
heard before. Sorry, somebody's trying to speak? Yeah.
I'll just
What really reached out to me was I love the way how the little boy held on to it. He followed her and was inside the house, and I like the idea of he asking, "Can I be your helper?" And she says, "Yes, you can come back tomorrow." Somehow that seems so warm and so lovely for me.
Can I just say thank you,
Yes.
Carol, for that story. It's great to hear you tell a story. I'm very much admire you as a storyteller who gives so much to the storytelling world, online as well as in person. I don't know you in person, but online. It's great to hear you telling a story. And I love the image in that story of the bubbles and the collecting of the bubbles, that she could still nourish those children who were neglected. So yeah, that's the bit of the story that really captured my imagination. That image of the bubbles coming out of the children who needed the stories. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
So
Goldie, you would like to go ahead?
Yes, I felt that the message was that there's good in everyone. Even though she was a nasty witch, she was bringing some joy and some good to the world. So I felt it was very rewarding to see the witch turn into a good witch. Thank you.
I feel like throughout history, witches have been maligned. Many of them have been healers. It also bothers me how, because of our the family we grew up in, the people that we associate with, so many times we label people as bad or enemy. And one of the workshops that I do is Weave Us Together, where I bring diverse groups together and work on what we have in common. Because when you go to solve a problem, the solution is much more creative if you have different viewpoints. And, we are part of the human family. And I have, my kids laugh at me because I'm kind of a serendipity kind of person. I just believe like the story's not over yet. We're creating the story and there's always things we can do. It's never hopeless. I'm curious, where do you think I could tell that story now that I've worked on it? I've been working on that story for almost a year to boil it down, without losing the meat of it, but making it more like stew, a little. Her story is much longer. And she's an environmentalist, so she has that take of the wild forest more than I put in it. I've switched the story. Sarah is a therapist in London, and I think when she wrote it, she wanted it to be a healing story, but it starts out and people are, if they know the legends and the fairy tales of Baba Yaga, they're a little scared.
If I may say something, I think that, well, I love this version of the story. Both the fact that she had also some sort of surgery, so she was in disguise somehow, and till the end, perhaps I thought that Baba Yaga was wicked. And I think that the mirror that Vasily looks at the end, somehow you can use this image, not just only to be an environmental story, but what it can see is actually what it could be also the main message that you can change according to the audience and according perhaps to the wider context you are telling the story. I think that the surprise of what Vasily sees in the mirror is really, it could be really, I don't know, somehow the secret that you keep till the end, and you can just change it and change the flavor and the message. And I think it's a very powerful element of the story. Thank you.
Yeah, that gives me a hope, Stephanie, that I could do environmental conferences and make it an environmental story about bringing back the wildwood.
Probably also a story that can reach out to parents as to what is actually happening with the kids and how parents are, instead of spending time with them, the kids are more on the phone or the TV or, gadgets is where is the connect? So I think this is something that the parents will relate to the story. So if you have a group of parents, there is probably young parents probably
Yeah.
would
It bothers me at restaurants. I see little toddlers and the parents are talking and the toddlers are on their phones playing games. They're not as a family interacting.
I once was at an event where it was an open event for kids of all ages to come and say a rhyme or a story or anything that they want. And I remember how a 2.5-year-old, the mother was insistent that the kid will speak, and she knew that her kid will tell a particular rhyme or something. She was quite excited, which happens with young parents. But the child would speak only if the phone was on, only while watching a video. And I was appalled looking at it, and I was surprised how the mother is perfectly fine with it. And she was playing the video for him so that he could just speak. And I think that this story will definitely reach out to parents like this, trying to make them understand as to what exactly is happening.
Mm-hmm. I see parents at Costco. That's a discount big place, and the kids are in their shopping cart and they're playing on their phones, and that keeps the kids quiet, And they're little children, and I'll see them putting the phone right up next to their ear, and it's like all this stuff that they're being exposed to, and they're not interacting with other people.
Yes.
It's almost can become an addiction. I worry about my teenage grandkids sometimes. They're in the car with me and I'm driving them somewhere, we're going somewhere, and they're on their phones.
I wouldn't just blame it on the kids. I find myself doing that a lot of times. just before going to bed, I would have my phone and my book, but more often than not, the book is put aside and I'm on the phone. And it's a reminder to myself that I should stop doing that.
Yeah. What I've read by health people is that you should not have your phone in your bedroom and don't have it on.
Yeah, yeah. I before we started this session, and I realized when you said my phone was downstairs and I was up, and I'm like, oh, we need to be doing that as well.
Yeah. They say you mustn't be on your phone for at least an hour before you go to bed.
So true, so true.
Keep away from the phone. But tell little kids that now, especially teenagers.
There's what I've read. What I've read is they have algorithms to keep us addicted to our phones. You know, how to keep us in the internet.
Thank you,
That
Karen.
was a beautiful story, a beautiful message, Karen. Thank you.
You're welcome.
On that
It was fun to
note,
share.
sorry, yes, Carrie, please continue.
I said it was really fun to share it because I've wanted to tell it, but where's the audience? And it seemed to fit with the theme. So now give me some ideas how I can tailor it to different groups. Thank you.
I think you are like the Baba Yaga of the story. I will tell you a story. Are you willing to listen and hear your stories out for all of us? So thank you so much for that, Carol. Really love that story. Let's move on to our next teller. We have Goldie Spencer's joining us from Toronto. And she's going to be sharing a personal story with us. Welcome, Goldie. Goldie, I'm so sorry about this. I think my tongue is all over the place. Welcome to the Chennai Storytelling Festival. Tell a little bit about yourself and share a story with us.
Okay. I have been telling for nearly 30 years, and I'm coming to the end of my journey because I didn't start until I retired from my work in my 60s. And so, as you can imagine, then I am now in my 90s. So I have reached the end of storytelling as a performer. I will continue to tell shorter stories, but I have belonged to a guild. June, who's being with us here today, is from Toronto, and I'm in the guild that she's in. It's the York Storytelling Guild. We formed that as a group to help each other with our stories, to improve them, and give hints on what might make it a better story and so on. And it's been very successful. And I've also told in many, many places. I was in Australia. I've told on some of the American Zoom online things. And I write a lot of personal stories, and that's what I'm going to tell you today. My story is called The Legend of the Cardinal. And it goes this way. Twas a sad day in May when I buried my Jack. It was hard to believe that he'd never be back. After the funeral, the house was filled with family and friends, and they were all there to comfort my son and I in our sorrow, but I was not comforted. I was in a state of shock, of despair. And the awkward words of condolence were beginning to stifle me. I needed air. I needed quiet. So I slipped out of the side of the house and went and sat down on the patio in one of the lounges. The yard backed onto a big park, and it was filled with trees, and now it seemed to be filled with bird song. I heard the call of a cardinal. As I sat there, I looked around, and everywhere there were signs of Jack's handiwork. There was the raised deck with the pergola atop. We had planted grapevines, and now they were climbed up and entwined around the timbers of the pergola. In the fall, it was the most used pergola by the cardinals. They would come and pluck one grape and then fly away and come back at a later time to have another one. And there in the center of the yard was our pear tree, and around it was a wooden platform which I had asked Jack to build for me, and many a summer evening we would sit out there and watch the sun set with its tinges of pink and orange and yellow as it sank below the horizon. And off in a corner was one of the shade gardens we had created. There was a large terracotta pot lying on its side, and every spring I filled it with red and white impatiens. And I just hoped I would have the will to do that again this spring. Jack and I were a team, not just in building gardens, but in many aspects of our life. And as I sat there, I began to wonder, what am I going to do without my soulmate? And at that very moment, from the sky flew down a cardinal and landed not on the grapevines, they were barely in leaf, no, but on the arm of the lounge I was sitting in. I turned my head slowly. I didn't want to frighten him. He was so close. I looked into his eyes and he seemed to be looking back at me. And I thought, could this be a sign from Jack? And then that beautiful bird just dipped its head slightly as if he was agreeing with my thought, and then lifted its wings and soared up, up and away. I never told anyone of that. I figured they would think it was too fanciful. And years went by. And not too long ago, I was doing some research on legends, and I came across the legend of the cardinal. I'd never heard of it before. And I began to read. Some people believe that the cardinal is a messenger from a loved one who has departed. They believe that the sighting of a cardinal is a message that they are thinking of you. I am now a believer. Others believe that if one of the departed wants to send a messenger, they often choose something from the animal kingdom, frequently with wings, because that seems to attract our attention. And it's a simple message that they're sending usually, and it is simply to say that they are always around. And I now believe that that cardinal was sent to me to let me know that Jack's spirit was around and always would be. So, the legend is true. The cardinal did appear. A message from Jack. My eyes shed a tear. Memories of our love will always be there, with those I'll not part, till I too am gone. Thank you. What I'd like to know is if anyone has ever experienced anything like that in their life. I have spoken to several people since I wrote this story, and many of them had believed in the cardinal legend, which I find remarkable. But they seem to see cardinals at various times of their lives. I just wonder if any of you have, if you have cardinals in your area.
Yes, Carol, would you like to go ahead? Carol, I can see your hand is raised.
I'm very interested in death. And I think it's good if you know ahead of time someone is dying, if you ask them to tell you how they're going to communicate with you, because I find that they're with us, people that love us, abiding love never dies. And so it may be a butterfly, it may be a bird, it may be a squirrel or a chipmunk or a dog, but it's nice if you have that tie. So then when you see that creature, that they're around. I really we lost a son, and it's very comforting to know. And my mother died when she was 60. She had ALS for 3 years, and she was too young to lose her. And it's very interesting. I have a children's picture book that's based on interviews with 177 children who had a near-death experience. That means they were medically declared dead, and they either were resuscitated or came back on their own. And I have pictures that they'd drawn of what happened when they died and how they were told it wasn't time and they had to come back. And I think this is one of the frontiers for humanity, that we see that life goes on. Just because someone doesn't have this physical body doesn't mean that they aren't in communication with us. I love the story. And I think, a cardinal, it's that red, that vivid red.
Beautiful bird.
Like the color of blood. Yes. And I so identified with you, like when you have a funeral or a celebration of life, and you get all these cards and everything, and it seems sometimes so trite, and you just need time to process it, because even if it's a drawn out death, it shakes your world up. You don't see the world the same when you lose someone that you love. And I think it's important that we take time, to grieve.
Well, I lost my husband. He had cancer, and he was given 6 months to live, and he died in 6 days. So it was quite traumatic.
Yeah, and we don't have time for the goodbye. Yeah. And one of the things, I work with seniors, and I advocate families to make scrapbooks with your seniors, because when their memory goes, that part of the brain that is musical and pictorial still lights up, and they can talk from a picture in a scrapbook. And they may not remember your name, but they've got stories to tell, and it's so wonderful. They so love to have visitors, and it's uncomfortable sometimes, to visit someone that isn't all there. But what a shock. I mean, you didn't have time to let go and share stories in 6 days. When I've talked to doctors, I've worked at medical conferences, and when I've talked to doctors, they say that medicine is an art as well as a science, and that they cannot predict who's going to die and who's going to live. They can do a surgery or a medical procedure, and they don't know.
Yes, Sarah, you want to go ahead next?
Yes, Carol, thank you for sharing that story. And what I wanted to share is that I remember when my mother-in-law passed away, and we were spreading her ashes, and this swoop of birds just flew in, and it was just startled us. And then later in that summer, I had all the grandchildren together and we were playing in the front yard, and the same group of birds swooped in. And I thought, oh my goodness. So when you talked about this cardinal, I thought, yes, 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 yes. My husband has dementia, and he had a cat who passed away, and she visits him, and he will tell me, he'll say, Miss Kitty's here. I said, she is. Well, give her my love. And he'll chuckle because I did not like his cat and she didn't like me. But he, but she comforts him. So I, as a woman of color from Mississippi and with ancestors from Nigeria, we believe in the ancestors. Our ancestors are with us. The spirits are with us. So even ancestors who we don't particularly like or they don't like us, they still arrive. But thank you for sharing. And I will say, I can't even imagine, my heart goes out to you. 6 months and then only 6 days. Oh, I was feeling sorry for myself because my husband has this dementia. It's called the long goodbye. But oh my God, it's going so fast. It's going so fast. I can't even imagine how you felt. So thank you for sharing. Thank you so much.
Alistair, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Goldie, thank you so much for that evocative story. I remember my mother who lived at Christie Gardens in Toronto while she had dementia, and every day she used to go and she would dump what was left of the bag of bread onto the balcony to feed the birds. And so I identify my mother's spirit with the birds. And now that the birds are singing again in my area, I always go back and talk to them when I hear them, and I think of my mother. I feel her presence, and I think it's no accident that when the cardinal appeared, you had found a peaceful time, a peaceful moment, sitting around the pear tree. And I think that's important that we carve out areas of peace in our busy lives and listen. Thank you so much, Goldie.
June, you want to go ahead now? You're on mute, June.
Goldie, I've heard that story before, and I just always have loved it. I love the way you set the garden scene and all the things you and Jack did together. It really brought the story alive for me, and it brought forth a memory, actually. My mother was very musical, and she died. She was almost 101. Rainy day in the graveyard. And just as we were standing around the grave, the sun came out and there was a tree there and a bird came down. I think it was a robin. It was in March. And your story just brought that memory back. And I haven't thought of it for quite a few years. So thank you.
Well, I live in an apartment now, so there's no visitations of anything. There are some pigeons that sit on the balcony, but that's about it because it's just tall apartment buildings everywhere, so there aren't any birds, especially cardinals. They wouldn't come around that area. So I don't know if there's other messages. I'll have to think about what I've seen and whether there's a different signal now from him. But we talk about him all the time, so he's alive in our hearts.
I want to compliment you, Goldie, on your poise. And many times when someone tells a story that is a grief story, we end up as listeners taking care of them, because it's like they're re-traumatized and they may be crying and you've come to a place where you can be a trusted guide. We don't have to take care of you.
Years ago, so I've had many, many years to get over the grief. But there are still times that tears come to my eyes. I have told this where I did tear up, but I didn't today.
Thank you for that wonderful story, Goldie. A lot of memories. A lot of people are talking about their mothers and birds. So thanks once again for sharing a piece of yourself with us.
Thank you.
Moving on from one bird story to another bird story, we have Sarah Addison joining us from New Mexico, sharing a self-written story, if I'm not wrong. Sarah, welcome to Chennai Storytelling Festival. Tell us a little about yourself and share your story with us.
Good morning, everyone. A little bit about me. I was born in the Mississippi Delta. I was raised on a farm in Kansas. And about 30 years ago, my husband transplanted me here to New Mexico. I, like most people, did not hear the new. All I heard was Mexico. And I began to think, how am I going to communicate? I'm a chatty Cathy. How am I going to communicate? I don't know the language. My husband speaks several languages, so I knew he would be okay, but I was concerned about myself. My grandmother taught me storytelling because, again, as a chatty Cathy, I got in trouble in school. And my mother would say, why can't you just shut up? And she said, look at your gifting. And I said, I can't sing, I can't dance, I can't do anything. She said, you have the gift of gab. And my grandmother said, we are storytellers. I'm going to teach you storytelling. And she did. So I've been telling stories all my life, listening and sharing stories. What made me become a professional storyteller is that when I was in school, storytellers would come in, but they would never tell a story about me and my family. The school I attended was predominantly white. And I thought, oh man, when I grow up, I'm going to tell stories to children so that when they come in, I can tell a story about them and they can go home. So once a month, I tell stories at Coas Bookstore. And I look at the children in the audience. And living here in New Mexico, we have a plethora of different nationalities. So I tell stories from around the world to the children. And I also ask them to share stories. And so it's a wonderful experience for me. Now, one of the things as a child is that I would read a story 3 times. My mom said, you have to read it 3 times perfectly, and then you could retell it. That was the best part. So I'm an avid reader. And unfortunately, that still continues today. Whenever I read a story, I retell it my own way. I look at ways to change it and what I would do differently. So the story that I'm going to share with you, I read a story called The Princess and the Dove. And it's a long story. So I created my own. So the story I'm going to share with you is called The Princess and a Bird. A long time ago, there lived a king. Now, this king, he was kind-hearted, but he only had one daughter. And oh my God, he loved her. She put the P in princess. He gave her whatever she wanted. She loved to paint. She would paint beautiful landscapes and animals on her wall. And her room looked like an art gallery. It was just gorgeous. But one thing that she really, really loved was to sit by the window, gaze out into the garden while she combed her hair. Her mother had passed away, and she left her 3 beautiful combs: a silver comb, a pearl comb, and a golden comb. Well, one morning she was sitting there combing her hair, and as she reached for her silver comb, this strange looking bird flew in and snatched her comb. And she looked and said, "Ah, that darn bird took my comb." She said, "Okay, I have two left. I'm all right." So the next morning she's sitting there, she's combing her hair, and she's braided it. And as she get ready to put it up, she reached for her pearl comb. And you know what happened? Oh, yeah. That pesky bird, he flew in again and took her comb. And she said, "All right, you do that again, I'm going to kill you." Her favorite comb was a golden comb, and she cherished that comb more than anything. Now, she loved those others, but she cherished her golden comb. The next morning, she's combing her hair and she's on the lookout for him. She's looking out to make sure that he's not around. Well, that pesky bird, he just flew right in and took that comb. And she said, "That's it. I'm going to kill you." She runs out into the garden and he plays this cat and mouse game with her. Oh, she would get close and then he would fly away. And she'd get closer and he'd fly away. And he kept doing that until she found herself in the forest. Now, I must tell you, this forest was beautiful. There was trees and leaves, and it looked like a canopy. And she was admiring it. And then she realized that she was lost. She didn't know how to get back home. She thought, what am I going to do? So she started walking. And she saw a clearing. And in this clearing, she saw this little hovel. We call it a lean-to because it was a little shack kind of lean like this. And she thought, perhaps there's someone there. But as she started walking, she was admiring this oak tree. It was huge. It had to be at least 300 years old. And from behind the tree, out stepped this drop-dead gorgeous man. She thought to herself, now, where did you come from? But she didn't say that. He looked at her and said, "What are you doing out here? Are you lost?" And she said, "Yes, I am. But what brought you into the forest?" She said, "Well, this bird, this pesky bird, had stolen my combs." And she began to tell him about the combs, about the silver comb, the pearl comb, and the golden comb. And she said, "I'm looking for him in my comb." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver comb. He said, "Is this your comb?" And she said, "Yes." He reached into the other pocket and pulled out the pearl comb. And the sun hit it and it glistened. And she said, "Yes, this is my comb." And then he reached into his breast pocket and he pulled out the golden comb. And she said, "Oh my goodness, these are my combs. Where did you find them?" And he said, "Come, walk with me." Now, remember I told you he was drop dead gorgeous? She had already fallen in love with him. His eyes, his voice, his broad shoulders. Oh my God, she was in love with him. They started walking towards the little lean-to. And he began to tell her a story. He said, "I am the bird that flew in and took your combs." And she said, "Why? I mean, how could you do that?" He said, "You see, I was disrespectful to my mother. And my father put a curse on me. And the only way the curse can be broken is that I meet a woman who will love me unconditionally, who will love me and break the curse." Well, she was in love with him. And she said, "I'm the woman for the job." She said, "What must I do? What do you need me to do?" And he said, "I need you to sit by this window 1 year, 1 month, and 1 day and wait for my return, and the spell will be broken." She thought for a second. 1 year, 1 month, and a day, that's a long time. And if I tell him yes, My father said, my word is my bond, so I must be careful. And she thought, and she looked at him again, and she looked at those broad shoulders, and she said, yes, I will do that. He gave her a hug and said, thank you. I'll be back. And he helped her to sit down in the chair, and he walked to the window and magically flew away through the window. Well, she sat there 1 year, 1 month, and 1 day. During that time, it rained on her. It snowed on her. The birds made a nest in her hair. Her dress became tattered and torn and old, and the forest animals made a home there. And her skin was like a tree bark. True to his word, 1 year, 1 month, and 1 day he returned. And when he walked in, she did not look anything like the woman he left. He looked at her and he said, oh my goodness, look at you. You are a mess. Your hair, your clothes, and you are smelly. And he turned and he spit on her. And then he walked away. She was devastated. I gave you my word. I sit here. And you have the audacity to spit on me? She tried to rise. She tried to stand, but she couldn't. Her legs couldn't. They would not let her. So she fell to the floor and she crawled out of the little lean-to. She crawled to the big oak tree and she laid there and she cried and she cried and she cried. And when she woke up, there were 3 wise women sitting on the ground beside her. And in unison, they said, we know what has happened to you, and we are here to help you. Now, the first woman, she touched her skin, and the bark began to melt away. As she applied the ointment that had a wonderful fragrance, her skin became soft and supple as before. The second woman, she touched her hair. And with her fingers, those knots began to melt away, leaving long, beautiful locks that cascaded down her back like a waterfall. And then the third woman, she reached out to her, held her hand, and gestured for her to rise. And when she rose, she touched her tattered clothing. And what appeared magically was a gown, purple and gold, fit for a queen. And she looked at her and she said, your wait was not in vain. You have a beautiful spirit. And there are people out here who will love you and value you. Now, pull your shoulders back, darling, and adjust your magical crown. And let's walk on. And from that day until the day the princess died, she walked proudly. She adjusted her crown and she helped those who needed help. But she never, ever forgot that darn bird. Ashe. All right, I have 3 questions for you. And first, let me just tell you a little bit about that story. I read that story several years ago, and I told it at a Border Book Festival here in Las Cruces. And during that time, Tim Tingle, I was a Mosca for Tim Tingle. And I remember when Sunday he said, I want you to share a story. And I said, I don't want to share a story. I'm here to take care of you. And I shared the story. And it's, of course, it's much longer, because she meets this bird again who becomes a king. And he does all this stuff to try to get her back. And she ends up telling him, I don't want to ever see you again unless you're in a coffin. And of course, he builds a coffin and he has himself carried around the city. And while I was telling that story, I finished it, and there was a guy in the back, and he stood up and he turned around 3 times in a circle, and he said, and he left. And that's when Tim said, that is your story. And I have been telling that story. Before I do tell a story, I pray for it. And I say, Lord, these are your people. What do you want me to tell them? And that's how I developed the story to change it for my audience. So I have 3 questions for you. Well, I have 2 questions. I want you to think about, if you're in trouble, the 3 people who would help you. Who are they? My mother told me that in my lifetime, I'll be able to count all my friends on one hand, and I'm not use all my fingers. I have found that to be true. And then the second question is, and you can answer either one of these if you like, who is the one person that you would rescue no matter what happened, no matter what time of day? Who is that one person?
If I may, Sarah, I would like to answer both the questions. The first one, the 3 people, I have a lot more than 3 people who would come to my rescue. I have 3 wonderful sisters. I'm the youngest one. So it's as good as having 4 mothers. So my 3 sisters are definitely the people who would always be there for me. And I have some very close friends as well. And who would I be there for? My oldest sister, Chandra. I would be there for her no matter what. I have no doubts of it. Thanks for sharing that story, and thanks for asking that question.
No, you're welcome. Thank you. Miss Goldie, I see your hand is up.
Yes, the one person that I would save no matter what is my son. I have pulled him out of many difficult situations from his time of being a teenager and then a young adult, and he has always relied on me to be there for him, and I will continue to do that as long as I can. But it's
Wonderful.
time to start saving me. Because I am now, as I told you, in my 90s, and so I am not that able to rescue people anymore. Thank you. Thank you for that really, really interesting story. And it was heart feeling because of her being able to take control of herself and forget this bird. Bird brain, I guess we could call them.
Yes, well, thank you for sharing that. Miss Carol, I see your hand is up.
Wonderful story for Women's History Month. It really touched me at thinking about when I was young and how looks were so important to me for boyfriends. And then as I got older, it was the heart. It wasn't the outer package. It was, somebody that could be my best friend. So the 3 people that I would depend on would be my husband and one of my daughters, Therese, and a friend of 39 years, Linda Marie. They've always been there no matter what time of day. And the person that I would rescue no matter what time of day would be my husband, Jerry. But he's done so much for me, and I would reciprocate. That's a beautiful story and very well told, Sarah. It was right from your heart to my heart. I really felt it. Beautiful. It shows the power of fairy tales, how they capture the wisdom, to guide us. And
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your comments. I truly appreciate them. I think that the times that we live in, I never dreamed I would see what I see today. But then I tell myself the United States is a very young country compared to everyone else in the world. We're bratty, we're teenagers. Yeah. The other thing is that this earth is billions of years old. How many civilizations have been here and gone? We're just one of the many. And if I was Mother Earth, y'all be gone, all of you. You're like you're killing my sea children, and you're ruining the earth with your polluting. No, you got to go out of here. If I got rid of the dinosaurs, who do you think you are in comparison? So it's a good thing. It's a good thing I'm not Mother Earth.
Sarah, you remind me of a priestess, the way you tell stories and the way you're dressed. I love your outfit. Yeah. I think you're an old soul.
Yeah, probably so. But Miss Carol, the reason I wear my head wraps is I gave a speech one time on head wraps and the law that came out of Louisiana back during anyway, a long time ago, when we were slaves, and we had the mulattoes, and the men couldn't tell who was mulatto, who was white, who was black. Well, they knew the black women, but they couldn't tell. And their wives, they're like, no, 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 no. This is not working out for us. So this lady, she had her husband to create this law called the Tignon Law, which is, and you can do your fact check me, please, somebody, that they had to have their head wraps. Well, you know how women are, how creative we are. You give us a piece of fabric, we can change it, we can wrap it up. I gave that presentation, and Miss Carol, I felt like I was 10 feet tall. And I have been wearing those head wraps ever since. I feel undressed without my head wrap on. I was working at the time at a hospital, and I worked with doctors because I credentialed them. And I went to HR and I said, listen, because from Kansas City, I would not have been able to wear this to work every day. It would not have been professional enough. But here I am in the Southwest. And so I asked the director, I said, may I wear this head wrap to work? And she said, yeah, you could wear it. I said, is it not going to be a problem? And I explained to her, the culture in Kansas City. And because I worked with the CEO, and I'm thinking, I don't want to embarrass him, and I don't want to be called out. It's just, oh no, honey, go ahead. You can wear it. And I have been wearing them ever since. And that was almost 20 years ago. And I love my head wrap. So thank you for that comment, Miss Carol. That makes me feel so good. Thank you. Are there any other comments?
Okay. What I noticed is because of the head wrap, I was really looking at your face, not your hair, because hair can be a distraction. Your face is very expressive.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, usually I wear black when I tell stories because I want people just to focus on my face and my gestures. But my husband, he thinks I wear too much black. And so he said, don't you have any other colors? I said, yeah. So sometimes I put a scarf or something on, but I still prefer to wear the black when I'm performing and sharing stories. Yeah. But thank you so much for allowing me to participate. This is my first time. So I'm excited. I am excited. So thank you.
Yes, Alistair, please go ahead.
Sarah, thank you for that story. It was very provocative for me as a listener because I kept thinking about how difficult it is to grow old with your partner and to allow them to change both in physical appearance and in attitude, and how love can transcend that sometimes. Other times I feel like the pesky bird. Uh, so it really touched my heart. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. One of the things I heard just the other day about growing older is that in our mind, we're young, but reality will tell us differently, when you try to get up and you can't. And I think that's the way love is. You look at that person and they've grown older gracefully. You still see that young person in them. With my husband, he doesn't talk to me during the day. He will speak to the caregivers. He just communicates with one word. And he was a historian. So it's sad for me for him not to share those stories with us. However, at night when we're together and we're watching the movies, he laughs and I see the twinkle in his eye. But the most important thing is that he knows who I am. And I'll say, "Do you know who I am?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "What am I?" "My baby." And sometimes he'll say, "My wife." And sometimes he'll say, "Sarah." But he always called me Miss Addison. He never really called me by my name. So I do miss hearing that. But as I look at him, yeah, I see that young man with the beautiful. Now, he had the broad shoulders. I described him in my story. He was the one with the tall shoulders. And he wore cowboy boots, and he told me that he was from New Mexico. And I thought, honey, I did not even hear the new in New Mexico. All I heard was Mexico. I told my mama, I said, "Oh, I bet somebody, mama." And she said, "Okay." I said, "He's from Mexico because he speaks Spanish." And she said, "You really?" She said, "Yeah, let me meet him." So she met him, and she looked at me. She said, "Honey, he looked black to me." Because I had told my mom I was going to date something different. I needed black people were all. I said, "They're not any good. I'm going to try something different." She said, "Listen, honey, men are all the same. They just come in different shapes, colors." I said, "Mama, they're dogs." And she said, "Well, you got to know what kind of dog you got, how to feed him, how to groom him." So when she met him, she said, "Oh, he looked black to me." And I said, "But he speaks Spanish." And she said, "You don't know no black people that speak Spanish, baby." I said, "Yes, ma'am." That was the end of that conversation. We have been married, 42 years now. Yeah, it's our 42nd year. Can't imagine my life without it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sarah. That's yet another way of knowing how we grow, how we mature, how we move on. And I think that has been the theme for Chennai Storytelling Festival. Thank you, everybody, for
I'd like to make a comment. I like that story because it shows how women rescue men so many times, and how men can really be hung up on looks. And I wondered, Sarah, if you can sing with your husband. Will he sing with you? Because lots of times when the memory goes, they'll still sing, and you can have fun that way.
Right. And I turned music on for him at night because he was a musician. He played percussions and the flute. So he loves music. But the one thing that I do is I sing to him at night. I sing him this "Good night, sweetheart, pleasant dreams, sweetheart." And when I get to the part, "I love you," he sings with me. I'll say, "I love you." And he'll say, "I love you." Oh,
Can he dance? Is he physically able to dance with you? Could he hold you in his arms and dance? No.
No, he can dance, but I have him in the sit to stand, so I'll dance with him in the sit to stand. I'll turn him and I'll say, "Oh, this is my favorite song. It's May's Happy Feelings. Let's dance, baby." And we used to dance all the time. We would dance on the deck. And He's a good, I'm a terrible dancer, but he's a good dancer. He'd always tell me, don't worry about it, I make you look good. So when I dance with him on the sit to stand, I tell him, don't worry about it, I'm going to make you look good.
Wow, what warm discussions. Loving this, but I'm afraid we will have to wrap it up now because our workshop is in place and the workshop presenter is here. Before we wrap up, thank you everybody for sharing your stories, sharing your thoughts, sharing your reflections. We have our final storytelling session for adults for the festival this year, which is tomorrow, Saturday, 2 p.m. India time. I hope you all log in at that time, and thank you so much for this wonderful time. Over to you, Eric.
And thank you, Pratikya. Thank you very much. And all the storytellers. Thank you.